You, my mouth!
Come on, He-Man.
I'll cut you, man.
Got the hots for you.
Wow, yeah, Sylvester Stallone in drag. He gets me every time. And he does it like twice in this movie. Welcome, y'all. Taylor James Johnson here, and I am absolutely loving the 80s, because the 80s was the decade of Sylvester Stallone, and one of his lesser-known films was Nighthawks, a film that came out in 1981. A gritty, action-packed thriller that was supposed to be a sequel to The French Connection, and now that I know that, everything makes sense. But, you know, a lot of things got all mixed up and changed. They even fired the director halfway through this movie, but still, somehow, it turned out quite alright. So yeah, it's got some interesting, wonderful action pieces and wonderful performances. One of Sylvester Stallone's best. And I'm not exaggerating, even though I often exaggerate. This isn't one of those times. So yeah, it's time to revisit it. Nighthawks, 1981.
This week, we're taking a look at the underrated and underseen early Sylvester Stallone vehicle, Nighthawks. In it, the late Rutger Hauer plays an international terrorist named Wolfgar, who's been rendered nearly unrecognizable after plastic surgery. He flees to New York City. Enter NYPD cop Deke DeSilvia, played by a very young and very bearded Sylvester Stallone, who, along with his partner Fox, played by Billy D. Williams, Lando Calrissian himself, finds himself transferred to a newly created anti-terrorism unit in order to take down the cold-blooded murderous Wolfgar once and for all. Now, in addition to Sylvester Stallone, Billy D. Williams, and Rutger Hauer, this movie also co-stars Persis Khambatta, who you may remember as the bald Ilea in Star Trek the Motion Picture, and for playing the love interest in perhaps the greatest film of all time, Megaforce. It's directed by Bruce Malmuth, although it was originally started by Gary Nelson, and word has it, Sylvester Stallone ghost-directed much of the film himself. Now, the history behind Nighthawks is pretty compelling stuff. Originally, the film was conceived as a third French Connection sequel, which would have pitted Gene Hackman's Popeye Doyle up against the terrorist modeled on the infamous Carlos the Jackal, while also pairing him with a partner that producers hoped would be played by Richard Pryor, who was making quite a few serious movies back in that era, including Paul Schrader's amazing and underrated Blue Collar. The project went kaput when Hackman decided he had had enough of playing Popeye Doyle and wanted to branch out. So the script made its way to Universal, where it was redeveloped into a project for Sylvester Stallone, who was then coming off of the first two Rocky movies, meaning he was a star, but not quite the icon he would become. Let's not forget, Paradise Alley was not a hit. Sylvester Stallone, in a Q&A with Ain't It Cool News years ago, as Sly said himself, and no, I'm not doing an impersonation, Nighthawks was a very difficult film to make, namely because no one believed that urban terrorism would ever happen in New York, thus the story was felt to be far-fetched. Nighthawks was an even better film before the studio lost faith in it and cut it to pieces. What was in the missing scenes was extraordinary acting by Rutger Hauer, Lindsay Wagner, and a finale that was a bloodfest that rivaled the finale of Taxi Driver. But it was a bloodfest with a purpose. And sadly, despite several Blu-ray re-releases, the director's cut of Nighthawks has never been found. Even still, we have to think of Nighthawks in the context in which it was made. Rutger Hauer had recently become an art house heartthrob when his Paul Verhoeven films Turkish Delight and Soldier of Orange made their way to North America, so he was imported to play the terrorist Wolfgar. Fitting their on-screen animosity, Stallone and Hauer quickly went to war on set, although both admitted years later that in the end they had a grudging respect for each other's work and that bygones were just that, bygones. The tension wasn't helped by the fact that after a week, director Gary Nelson, who was then coming off of two Disney movies, Freaky Friday and The Black Hole, and not necessarily the guy that you'd get to direct this hardcore action thriller, was fired, briefly leaving the production without a director. Stallone stepped in but got into hot water with the Directors Guild of America, and Bruce Malmuth, whose biggest project up to that point had been an after-school special, was hired. Smooth sailing it was not, with the finished film being cut and recut, first by Sly, then by the studio. In the end, many of Stallone's dramatic scenes were cut, Billy D. Williams' character became minor when he was originally a co-lead, and Lindsay Wagner, then best known for TV's The Bionic Woman, found that most of her role was excised. She basically just has a cameo role in the film, and Hauer's big death scene was cut to ribbons. Even still, the movie did pretty well financially, grossing close to $20 million, which was 4 times its budget, although the movie is sadly pretty obscure nowadays. And in an interview with Entertainment Weekly, Stallone explained it by saying it was a little bit ahead of its time in that it was dealing with urban terrorism. Now with the World Trade Center, it's happening. At the time, however, people couldn't relate to it, and the studio, Universal, didn't believe in it. Rutger Hauer's performance held it together, and he was an excellent villain. Rutger Hauer himself explained his role in a Nerve.com interview by saying, "The more dangerous the villain, the more it gives credit to the hero. I read a book by a real terrorist who the character was based on, and it was pretty scary. And it wasn't a stupid book. The whole idea was, as a bad guy, you don't look like the devil, and you don't behave like an idiot. You know, I think the devil's very smart, probably smarter than all of us." Now, Nighthawks shouldn't be great. The whole production process sounds like it was a nightmare, and given how hastily it was cut and recut, it should be a movie that's pretty choppy. Yet, even if it's compromised, it works rather well, thanks to the plot that at the time may have seemed far-fetched, but now is all too realistic. It's worth noting that Stallone's performances is really one of his best. I love Sly, but Sly pre-Rocky III and First Blood is a different beast. At the time, many saw him as a Brando-like method actor rather than an action hero, and as such, the movie is much more of a thriller than an action flick. When I was a kid and I saw Nighthawks on TV, I was disappointed. I was expecting Tango and Cash. Instead, I got something, of course, that's a lot more like The French Connection. Nowadays, I respect it and enjoy it a lot. The story and De Silva's horror at Wolfgar's actions are at the forefront, and notably, Sly only kills one person in the film, Wolfgar himself. It's the journey to that end that makes Nighthawks compelling, with him bristling at the idea that as a cop, he should be expected to coldly execute anyone. That he underestimated Wolfgar's sadism is what the plot hinges on, with Hauer's wild-eyed baddie stronger and smarter than De Silva could ever hope to be. But if he's gonna protect and serve, De Silva's gotta put him down. And their good versus evil tango is compelling, and oddly enough, the re-editing which sidelined Williams and Wagner may have actually helped the film in a way, because it makes the film much more about Stallone versus Hauer and a two-hander than an ensemble film, which maybe it was planned to be. It's worth noting that Hauer was at the peak of his abilities here, with Wolfgar magnetic throughout, and it's no wonder he started getting so many offers in the wake of this, with Blade Runner following the next year. The movie also has a cool, grimy, pre-Giuliani NYC vibe, and I'm not sure who should be getting the credit, Nelson, Malmuth, or Sly himself. It feels seedy in that late 70s, early 80s grindhouse way, with nifty character actors like Joe Spinell in the cast, and a funky progressive rock score by Keith Emerson of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. There's nothing quite like Nighthawks, and while it's dated, I have to say, that's kind of part of its charm. Have you ever seen Sylvester Stallone in drag? Especially a fully bearded Sylvester Stallone? Well, if you watch Nighthawks, you'll get your chance, with his character having a very strange habit of dressing up as female decoys, something he does more than once in the film. It's a rather idiosyncratic touch, especially given the Serpico-style beard Stallone is rocking throughout, and I have to say, Sly looks cool in this flick. Now, the best way to see Nighthawks is without a doubt via the recent Shout Factory Blu-ray re-release. All previous DVD versions of the movie are missing music tracks like the Rolling Stones' Brown Sugar, and generally looked pretty bad. Shout Factory did a pretty good job restoring the movie to HD on Blu-ray, and is the only way to go, but sadly they were not able to locate the director's cut of this film with the intact death scene and some of the missing scenes. It's too bad, because all we really have are still images that suggest what it might have been, and an extended version of Keith Emerson's score, which you could find on YouTube. Now, Nighthawks is one that's bound to surprise even the most devoted Sly fans. It falls into a very little examined period in his career, post-Rocky II and pre-Rocky III, where he was struggling to find his footing at the box office and Hollywood hadn't quite figured out what to do with him yet. While movies like Victory arguably miscast him as a soccer-playing goalie, Nighthawks cast him perfectly as this Pacino-style cop. If you've never heard of it, give Nighthawks a try, because I think you'll love it. For JoeBlow.com, I'm Chris Bummer.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. Joe Blow was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.